As many of you know, big announcement this last couple of weeks. We have a new education commissioner, and so we're glad to have Dr. Randy Watson here with us and share some thoughts about the future.
I thought you were the guest, Jay. Come on, what's up with that? Wow, good to see everyone. It's great to leave McPherson. We're in the middle of a little whooping cough outbreak, and McPherson County growing as I think I'm here. So, just a couple things I want you to know. Working closely with Brad and Dale, as you can guess, and I won't officially start till July 1. So, Brad will be the interim until then, and we correspond a lot. So. And he's been great in this transition. So he will certainly help you in any way that you can, any way that he can and that you need until transition. And so just a couple things, I think what's on the horizon, we're going to be looking at doing. The state board generally does a retreat in February, and I think they're still planning to do that. One of the things I'm going to talk to him about in December is possibly postponing that a little bit, because I'd really like to come out and spend some time, or a lot of time, across the state in trying to develop a vision where we all want to go with education. I think it's going to be extremely important to not only get us, teachers, community people, legislators, and higher ed talking about what do we want and where do we want to go. Because, as you know, money's a huge issue for all of us, and I think we're going to have to know where we're going to put that money and where our priority is going to be, and versus just reacting all the time, which I think that we do oftentimes when the legislature meets. So I don't know if the state board wants to do that, but that's what I'm going to talk to them about in December. I think that's really important. That's going to take some time. There's 10, as you know, state board regions. And some of those are extremely large. This one that we're in is very large. Western Kansas is even bigger. So I'm thinking somewhere 12 to 15 visits that we'll try to put together. And then, I want to listen a lot. And because I hear your frustrations. Number one, we have no money, right? I know that. I'm living that. Number two, licensure. All of you have issues related to attracting good teachers. That's going to become even more and more difficult, I think, as we've now dropped to 42nd in the nation in teacher salaries. That's one of those delay factors. And then assessment, accreditation, the amount of time, what are we going to get for that? So there's a lot of things we need to talk about and see if we can get it right, on top of court case coming down and a very conservative legislature and governor for the next 4 years, so, or at least in the governor's office. So how we'll do that. So what questions do you have? Whooping cough advice, 6 cases when I left, and trying to talk my nurse down off the ledge right now, right? Everyone's in a panic. Well, I think maybe you are, so we'll start with that. But you know how that is. So before we get to the parents. Nothing? No questions? Come on, Don, no questions?
Well, I'd like to get your response about where do you think the legislature is going to start in January? What's the big issue besides finance? Are they going to do anything constructive, or are we just going to talk for another 3 months?
They've got to deal with the budget, and they all know that. And I think you're seeing a lot of movement really on that. I think they're going to talk about a lot of things related to solving the state budget issue, and I think they will discuss cuts, revenues. But I think they will discuss some of that. I look for a fairly aggressive conservative movement on a lot of education fronts. Now, whether that happens or not, if you look at the last session, Don, tenure at 3 in the morning. So is collective bargaining next? I think, the tea leaves may say that may be. Administrative consolidation. I think so I think there'll be looks at all that. I'm guessing. I have no insight on that. It's not like someone told me in the back secret room. I'm just guessing like the rest of you. But I think budget's going to, all those other things will be talked about, but boy, budget's going to just overwhelm everything. They've got to get that corrected, and they know that as they're headed toward a deficit. So, yeah, Bill.
In terms of the budget, have you had any sense of how they view why we are where we are? Do they have a realization that probably the revenue stream being cut off was a big contributing factor? Does anybody say that?
Yeah, I think there's a realization of that, Bill. Yeah, I think now that the election's over, I think everyone would say, the growth that we had hoped to see hasn't happened with the projection of the budget cuts. And so that's going to have to be looked at. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think that people agree with that. The 800-pound gorilla then is what happens to K-12 education or higher ed, those combinations. The governor has said he will not touch K-12 education this year, and I believe him that he won't. Now, I don't know if that means the bank of KDOT. I think, some things short term. That doesn't mean necessarily, though, for next year after we get past July 1. Now, again, we'll have a court case that will be appealed immediately to the Supreme Court. That'll happen between now and then, too. So, but I think, yes, there's a realization that that's the major reason that we're in the situation we're in. But I will tell you, Kansas we've got to figure out a way to grow our economy. Because even if you go back to the Sebelius Graves administrations, our economy hasn't been growing very fast, as you know, in Kansas. And in many places, we're losing population. So I can be pretty apolitical a lot, and I don't know the solution. I'm a history teacher, and I remember President Johnson declaring war on poverty. In 65, we have more poverty today than we did then. So I think whatever side of the aisle you are, how do we solve poverty and how do we solve growth in Kansas? I mean, in a state that's losing, other than certain parts of Kansas, pretty substantial population. I think everyone's after that goal. I think we differ on how to get there sometimes, Bill. Yes, Steve.
Randy, regarding the waiver, one of the challenges over the past several years was getting an assessment system that was aligned to the Common Core / Kansas College and Career Ready standards. All the while, there was a conservative push to do away with the Common Core standards, Kansas College and Career standards, and I'm assuming adopt something else. Where does that conversation now go under your leadership with assessment and standards alignment? And do you have any sort of vision that you would share with us today about that?
Well, we have to re-up the waiver, first of all, by the end of March. So it's a really tight time frame. It has to be resubmitted for an extension. So we've got that there. I'll come back to Don's comment, which I forgot. I think Common Core, they're going to go after Common Core. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, whether they have the votes, I don't know. But as you know, the Common Core discussion is so political. I mean, Common Core was started by chief state school officers and governors, primarily Republicans, on saying we didn't have high enough international standards to compete against other nations. And the two governors that led the charge were Jeb Bush in Florida and Mike Huckabee in Arkansas. Now, what happened is Obama used that Common Core to give out race to the top money. And that's what irritated a lot of Republicans. So I worry about Common Core in this sense. We don't have much money, right? Jay will tell you we have even going to have less money at the department. Departments are going to take a hit before we see K-12 take a hit. So if we throw out Common Core, does anyone know where we're going to get the $2, $3, $4, $5 million to go design our own? We could certainly put people together and do that like Oklahoma's doing, but there's a cost to that. That worries me. If you look at other standards, So you look at college-ready standards from ACT or College Board standards, they don't go any lower than third grade. So there's a problem there for as you relate to pre-K2, and what do you do? So I think we've got to try to keep Common Core. Now, a lot of that's going to relate to just how political it becomes, because most of the people that you talk to aren't necessarily disliking the standards. They dislike, it's like Obamacare. They dislike how he went about attaching it to raise the top funds. So I think so that challenge and waiver timing are a challenge. And then where it really comes down for all of us is the assessment. All right. And we have a dilemma. So here's a dilemma. So our good curriculum friends, right? Tamara's going to tell me, and Cindy's going to tell me, you're going to tell me, we've got to have rich data out of these assessments, right? We've got to have rich data. Well, rich data is time consuming to get. So we've got to balance how many hours are we going to assess kids, and what are we going to get for those hours? And I'm not sure we're not out of balance with that a little bit. That's I'm talking about mostly grades 3 through 8. When you get to the high school, then it makes a lot of sense to me to assess a kid based upon what he or she plans to do, and make that kind of your high school exam. Now, there's issues with that as it relates to the federal government would like for us all to use one test. But that comes down to wanting to make sure we can identify focus and priority schools. Okay, and how many of you do not have a focus or priority school in your district? The vast majority of us don't have a focus and priority school. So the question we're trying to wrestle with internally is, can we maybe do something different for focus and priority schools, like a random sample that the rest of the state could get some flexibility from? And the innovative schools are trying to lead that. We're actually going to apply for a waiver for the innovative schools from assessment. Blue Valley, for example, would like to use the PISA. I don't know if you know, but Blue Valley's motto a year ago was beat Singapore. They did that, by the way. So now their motto is beat Finland. That's their hashtag. You can go, all right, that's a great. And they want to use the PISA because their scores are extremely high. Well, okay, could we do that, for example? So every one of the school districts currently involved in the Coalition of Innovative School Districts wants to waive assessment and do something different. We're going to try to work that into the waiver extension and see if we can't move to a little bit different system that gives some flexibility, both within focus and priority schools and within other school districts if they want that flexibility. I'm a believer that you should only assess a child if it's meaningful assessment that you do something with. And for the most part, those happen in the classroom so that you can judge instruction and then make decisions. When it comes to accountability, I think we need to really flatten that footprint. I think that we know, which kids are succeeding, which aren't. And I think we need to move to a different outcome. Bill's heard me say this. Here's the progression in my mind. So when I started in Tesket, at Tesket High School, it was, hey, there's this metal cupboard up there. Open it up. There's your textbooks. Good luck. And that was my curriculum, right? I saw John Webb. Some of you know John and Kelly. They were students of mine in Tesket. John said, man, I remember in psychology class, you taught me how to juggle. That's true, because I didn't know anything. I was teaching 7 stinking hours a day different. I didn't know anything about psychology. I was a history major, but your social studies comprehensive. I'm 21 trying to figure it out. Reading the textbook the night before. That was my curriculum. In the mid-'80s, the state said we ought to have some oversight, and we did minimum competency test. I mean, if you remember minimum competency test, right? And then we layered QPA, right? and those of us can remember Fred Campbell and Max Heim touring the state, trying to sell us on, let's accredit schools based upon what were called outcomes. Not where your flagpole is and how many books are in your library, but on outcomes. And here were the outcomes. Student achievement based upon 3 measures that you decided locally. And we all liked it. We had performance assessments. Teams came out, and we were generally pretty happy. There were a little bit of dissatisfaction with human sexuality, right? I mean, that was really kind of the critical part, but we liked it. No Child Left Behind, overlaid on that, really stringent accountability of one assessment, though, reading and math. Took away kind of the 3-prong look. I think reading and math assessments are not outcomes. They're inputs to what makes a student successful. That's the outcome. The outcome is when students leave us, do they have the likelihood of being successful? And academic success is a part of that. It's an important part. It's not the only part. And we've got to move that discussion. So that's a long answer, but we've got to move that discussion away from reading and math, even science and social studies. When I talked to Marlon Berry, he says, we have mental health, some crisis in Olathe. Kids not being mentally healthy. I've got to address that. Okay. He's got to address that for his kids to be successful. So what I want to have a discussion across the state is that 25-year-old young successful adult. What are the characteristics of that person? And then how do we know when they leave Nickerson High School, Bill, that, yeah, we think that person's on the track to doing that? You know, for some of our communities, it may be we have to up our drug and alcohol awareness. In other communities, we need to up our academic achievement. But I think we've sold academic achievement as the outcome. I don't think it's an outcome. I think it's an input for all of us to evaluate, are we on the right path? Bill, you had a question.
Yeah, it's that tail wagging the dog federal piece that bothers me still. And here's the question I would have for high schools. How many priority or out-focused high schools do we have? Because if we don't have any, or we have 1 or 2, why are we letting that accountability piece for the entire system be driven, especially in the high school, by maybe we do have 1 or 2, because most of us don't support our high schools with Title I money anyway.
Everyone has at least one title building in their district.
Right.
Every district has at least a title
Most
building.
of them aren't high schools, though.
Most of them aren't high schools, and most of them aren't focused on priority.
Exactly.
All right? So we're asking the same question.
Very good.
Now, remember this. You now have a legislature at the federal level. It's controlled by the Republicans, both houses. We may see a reauthorization of the law, which then makes all waivers moot. So there's 2 things that I think that Brad and I and Dale have to do at the federal level. We've got to get a waiver that's right to give you some relief, real relief. And believe me, Cindy Lane beats me up on priority and focus schools daily, and Julie Ford, because here's the problem for her, is that she has a plan. Go read KCK's plan, Diploma Plus. She has a very specific plan on what she wants to do to get her kids ready. But every time that she gets money, federal money, they want to lay a different plan on her. And she's saying, just let me do the plan. Julie's saying the same thing. So we've got to help that group. We've got to get you some relief from the things that just don't make sense in terms of the time that you're devoting to it. That's part of the waiver. At the same time, I've got to be spending some time with Roberts and Moran and our representatives on the reauthorization, because we've got to get that right. We've got to get because once the reauthorization happens, the waiver goes. So it's kind of a 2-prong that we have to take a look at from the federal level, and we're working on that at the same time, because the reauthorization could happen fairly soon, and we don't. If it's good, we don't want the president to veto it. And right now there's some bipartisan bills that are floating around for the reauthorization that could be pretty good. That would give us more control in Kansas for what we want to do. We want, I think, I do as superintendent, And I know I want as commissioner, there is some accountability that the state needs to have. I think it boils down to when they leave Buhler High School, are they ready to be successful? I think there are many ways that Mike can tell me that. I want to give the flexibility back to doing that. With that, I killed all discussion. All discussion. Also, we're looking at things that have been extremely successful. Senate Bill 155, what Jay's heading, with getting kids who aren't going on a 4-year baccalaureate or maybe are, but certificates and getting credit has been a tremendous success. And everyone agrees that was a tremendous success. Conservative, liberal, moderate, everyone agrees with that. How can we do more things like that? Where we have agreement versus not agreement. We all live with certain local media, and we have still a daily paper in McPherson. We have a radio, and their role has been diminished over the years just because more and more people get their news from other places, but we still have that. But it's been already so interesting to me to see how, why people who are in the media all the time bash the media. One of the first calls I got was from an Eastern newspaper that said, John, you'll appreciate this because I called Rick Dole, that'll tell you where it came from, said, okay, I don't mean this offensive, but are you just shocked that a superintendent in a small western Kansas school would become commissioner? I was offended for my community of McPherson to be called a small western Kansas town. And then it was, wanting to get me to comment on the battles that need to be chosen. I don't, I'm getting older. I don't have, a lot of time to worry about the battles. I think we need to worry about how do we get better going forward. And so I'm less inclined to just want to pick political battles to win or not win those and see if we can move things forward. So I need to continually listen to your frustrations, and I know at the top of that is money. And we'll have to deal with that. But I know that within the day, there are other frustrations that I think we have some control over. As you know, as superintendent and as curriculum people, you have control over some things. I will have that as commissioner, but you have influence over other things. You don't have control. I don't have control over finance. Dale doesn't have control over what the legislature does. We have influence. So know when you have control and use that. Assessments, we have control over that. We control that. So it's kind of like schedule, You control that. Sometimes you don't like it, because I don't like my schedule, high school schedule, but you can control it. So I'm trying to focus on things we control, and then things we have influence, we'll try to have influence, but know that I don't have final say on many of those things. And the department doesn't either. So good to see so many good faces, familiar faces, friendly faces. Always remember that you're my friend. Just remember that. In case you ever wondered, just remember. Well, again, share with me your thoughts and concerns. Share with Brad. We're already, Brad and I are, talking, and Dale about things that we want to get done. Many of you, I'm going to ask to serve in many, many ways. And one of those is I plan to have several groups, and many of you are going to be asked to just come in, or I'll come to you, whatever, and, for you to say, you're full of crap. And I'm okay with that, because I want you to trust me that I need to know that. You need to surround yourself with people that'll tell you at times when you're not doing the right things. And so I'm going to ask some of you to do that on a regular basis for me. So, okay, Mike, I've used well beyond my allotted time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Watson, for being here.